What is up, y'all? Hey everyone, welcome to another video. This topic I get asked quite often. Besides the checklist one, people are always like, how do au pairs, or how did the au pairs manage to stay after the au pair year? And so I did some research. I feel like I need a whole medal or a degree after all this research. I did some research on the Homeland Security page. I looked at a little blog. I watched YouTube videos. And I just asked random au pairs. I was like looking up au pairs and seeing how long they've been here and what they did. And I just straight up was like, yo, how did you stay? How are you still here? And then some of the stories are actually people that I've encountered during my au pair journey, whether it was the first time or the second time. So I have a lot of notes. I actually have 6 different ways au pairs have stayed in America in the past. And so I'm going to talk about them. Now, disclaimer. I feel like I have to do a disclaimer because some of you guys are going to come to me and be like, so how, what? Listen, I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney. I am not a judge. If you want to do any of these things, you're going to have to do more research on your own. Meaning, like, if you hear one of the things I'm talking about or one of the ways au pairs have stayed, you're going to specifically have to take that topic and do more research for yourself. Let's get into the juicy stuff. Number 1. The first visa au pairs have actually stayed with, and I actually met a girl in Colorado, and that's how I knew about this visa, is a volunteer's visa. And now with this visa, missionaries come, they use it. I think some firefighters, or even firefighters use it. You can be a firefighter from volunteer to be a firefighter, and you get sponsored a volunteer's visa. Now I must say it may be different if you're outside the country. I'm talking about people that are in here. And so when I was first an au pair and I was in Colorado, I met this au pair. I was just like, oh, I'm an au pair. And she was like, what? And she's like, I used to be an au pair like, what, 2 years ago or a few years ago, whatever. And so I was like, oh, really? That's cool. How are you still here? And so she said she used to volunteer at the church she attended. And then when her time was up to go back home, that whole thing, they couldn't find somebody to fill the position. And she didn't want to just leave them stranded, that whole thing, and she really loved doing it. And so they offered to give her a volunteer's visa. So you can volunteer at a non-profit organization, a charity place, a church, temple, depending of whatever you want to volunteer in. Now I must say to you that because you're volunteering, you don't get a salary. You get like a stipend. When I was looking at immigration and like what's allowed, you get like a stipend, or you can just buy stuff and they can reimburse you, that kind of thing, but you don't get like an actual salary. The next one, this is the second way people have stayed, is the marriage or spousal visa. Now what happens here, this is one of like the most common ones. A lot of people, if you haven't heard of 90 Days to Wed, then you're living under a rock. But what happens is au pairs come to America, they fall in love. Well, some of them it's the intention, some of them it's not. But they come to America, fall in love, and then at the end of their year, they don't want to do long distance or they don't want to go home. And so they get married. Now, whoever is the American citizen, they sponsors them a visa, they get married, and this process is considered one of the fastest ways to get your green card, but it can be very tedious, but it's not impossible. Also, this process can take between 10 to 38 months. Now, when I was doing research, most of the blogs and even the YouTube video I was watching was saying this was during the pandemic. However, it could take longer because of the pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. So just be mindful that the prices you pay for all these things and the time frame that's on the sites may be a bit longer, or they can be, if you're lucky, it could be the exact same time. The marriage visa has 3 different steps. Obviously, the first one, you have to fill in a form. It is the I-30 form, and then you also have to prove, so you have to get your marriage license, you have to have pictures of you and your person proving that you guys are married and that this person is not just staying in the country because they want to stay. You have to have bills with both of you guys' names on. So like if you guys are renting a place, you must have the husband and the wife's name on. It must prove that the person that's sponsoring you is an American citizen, so like citizenship, like a passport and all those things. It must prove that you guys have the money to, you know, like to live together, that the person's not going to become part of the state, dependent on the government, where the government has to, you know, like fund them, that whole thing. Oh, you need birth certificates, you need what else, like the sponsor, joint account, pictures, all those things you have to prove, and then you have to fill in the I-30. Then the second part is you put all your documents together and then you file for your green card. Do you need a form? Yes, you file for your green card, and then you fill in a form I-485, or on the side, a lot of them were saying, or you fill in a DS-260. So you fill in those forms, and then the third part is you have a green card interview. And when I was looking at like questions that people have been asked about the green card interview, it's stuff like, what's your person's favorite color? What's his color toothbrush? You know, like they ask you things that you should know because you're dating this person. They try to like trick you to see if you really know this person or if you're actually staying just because you want a green card. And then once the interview is done, you're in the waiting process, meaning you're just like waiting for your paperwork to go through. Now, I must say that when you get married and you like fill in the forms, I think you have like 90 days. That's why it's called 90 days to it. You get 90 days to get married, that whole thing. So just be mindful. That's where people throw the whole big shebang wedding. And some people actually just prefer going to court, getting married, or having a backyard wedding. And then once the paperwork is gone through and they have their green card, then they go full out. Now, as I said to you that for the sake of this video, I have summarized quite a few things, and I will still summarize quite a few things. So if you choose something, definitely go do more research for yourself. Number 3. So number 3 is the EB3 green card. I almost said the EB3 green card visa because some of them call it that. But what happens with the EB3 green card is your host family sponsors you a green card. But before they even get to the sponsoring part, they have to put out some form of advertisement, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's in the newspaper, somewhere like where you can market stuff, LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. And you say, hey, I'm looking for this. Basically give a criteria of what an au pair would do. You want all these things, and this is how much you're going to pay, like an au pair stipend. And then typically, Americans won't respond to it because they don't want to get paid the stipend like an au pair. And so what happens, nobody responds to it. And so the host family takes all that and goes to the labor department, and they're like, look, this is what we want, this is how much we can afford, and nobody in America has applied, or nobody in America has proven that they want this job. This is proof to say that we're not taking jobs from America, because the purpose from labor departments is that they want to make sure that you're not giving jobs to people outside the country when there are people inside the country that need the jobs. And so with them doing that, they're going to the labor department and they're proving that, look, we have opened this up to Americans, and we have said Americans can work, but no American wants to do it. However, we have an au pair currently who's from whatever country she is, and she is willing to do it for the rate she's doing it, because she's been doing it for that rate anyway. So can we keep her? Can we sponsor her a green card? And so then that's when the process starts, because, well, it started, but that's when, like, okay, now the paperwork happens, is because you have to prove to the labor department that, yo, you know, as I said earlier, we're not stealing jobs from Americans. So with this visa, it can be a skilled worker, a professional, or unskilled worker. And most of the time, au pairs fall under the unskilled worker. And I think you have to have like under 2 years or a year and a half experience, which meaning you're an au pair, so you have experience with childcare. And so that was step 1, the labor department thing. And then step 2, that's when you fill in a form your host family fills in. It's the I-140. You fill in an I-140 form, your host family fills it in, basically stating that, listen, we want to sponsor them, we want them to stay, we want them to work for us. And then step 3 is you pay the processing fees, you do like all the admin. It's basically the bringing all the work together, the forms. They ask the au pair for what, like either her highest level education. The host family's like, okay, we can afford to keep her. She's not going to be under the government once again. Like, you know, we financially stable. She won't, you know, suck the government dry, those kind of things. And then step 4 is you basically submit your documents and any supporting documents that they require or they ask you for. So step 4 is basically like you submit, and they'll send it back to you like, no, we don't want this, we want that. And then you have to submit this, go for the fingerprint, go for this, that, and then it's just a waiting game. Now this takes between 15 to 24 months. And once again, it could take longer because they're still catching up to all the backtracks from the pandemic. Now we are on student visas. So the 4th one is student visas. This is another way au pairs stay afterwards. This is also another popular one. I think when I came here, I mainly had the marriage visa and the student visa. And so with the student visa, what happens is you have to apply to a university or a college first, because they're going to be your sponsors. Now, I must tell you that you can't go and be like, I'm going to apply for a 3 weeks course and then apply for a student visa, because it's not going to work. That's not going to happen. You need to apply for a university or college that's accredited, and you have to have a certain amount of credits you studying before even just, like applying. And so once you get accepted into the whole student, like once you get accepted into that school, I would highly recommend going to the international department and letting them help you, because chances are they're very experienced with this whole thing, and it'll make your life much more easy. Now, if you want to do it on your own, you have to, once you get proof, you have to show that, listen, I've been accepted into a school. Number one, the part where your host family comes in is your host family will have to be like your sponsors in a way, meaning they want, again, to prove that, hey, yes, you're a student, but how are you going to live outside of being a student, because you can't work. You only, I think, can work like 20 hours per week, which is not a lot. And so your host family comes in and is like, listen, we have this amount of money, and you have to show a bank account that you have this money, whatever. We will take care of her or him as they're here to study. We'll look after them. They will live with us, that whole thing. And so that's where your host family comes in. And then you have to start applying. And then once, like your paperwork is gone through, and I highly recommend going through the international department, because when I was starting and I wanted to study the whole thing, they were amazing, and they will advise you and they will push you. It does go faster because you are in the country already. But I must just tell you, there's a bit of restrictions with like you being able to go visit your family and not when you're in the process. And just make sure that you and your host family are comfortable with them, like they comfortable sponsoring you, that whole thing. And then you have to also figure out like how are you going to work your 20 hours, because I think it's 20 and it's like 25 if you work on campus. I stand to be corrected. You would have to do your own research even more. Number 5. So number 5 is a work visa. You guys have heard this one before, but I would say it's similar to the EB3, but the EB3 is a green card. This is a work visa, meaning when you're done with the company, if the company gives you 5 years, for example, they sponsor your visa for 5 years. When your visa is done, you have to find the same company to renew it for you, or you have to go home. So with a work visa, as I touched on a bit, is that the company you work for will sponsor you a visa. Now, host families that have businesses of their own, there was actually a girl that I knew, her host family had a business of their own. And so instead of them doing the whole EB3 and the student way and whatever, they just gave her a work visa. They put her under as an employee in their company. She was not working in the actual company. She was like still their au pair, but she was under as an employee in the company. And so she got a work visa. The only tricky part is, and I don't know how she's done it, because this was something she was worried about, is like when your 5 years or however long your work visa is expires, you have to figure out if you still want to stay in the country and how are you going to stay legally, or you go home because this company is no longer sponsoring you unless you find another company who's willing to sponsor you. And so yeah, so that is the work visa. And lastly, now this is number 6, but before I get to number 6, I would just love to say this. If you're deciding to stay, especially if you're just watching this video, whether you're deciding to stay or you're not sure if you want to stay with him, I would say if you're open to staying, because this is one thing I'm like, I really regret, but at the same time, I'm glad I'm just wired this way, so it didn't backfire. It would have backfired if I hadn't been wired this way, is save money. I actually have a video explaining how au pairs should save money, and so I'll put the link somewhere on the screen and maybe even in the description. But save money, especially if you think you might be open to staying here longer, because I was not open to staying here longer. I was sure I was going home, but because I'm a natural saver, like I just naturally save, I'm grateful because I have that money to fall back on. But I know people who were not natural savers who turned up, and then in the last few months they were like, actually I want to stay, and now they have to like save, because even if your host family is gonna sponsor you, or you have a boyfriend that's gonna sponsor you and all these things, you don't want to be put in a situation where you can't look after yourself. So I highly recommend just save money for yourself. You never know what could happen. Your boyfriend could decide last minute he doesn't want to be with you, and you kicked out and you need a hotel at least for a few nights. Or your host family can decide, you know what, we're just going to take advantage of you because you're no longer an agency. I always say save money. Make sure you have some money saved. especially if you're open or you know that there's a possibility you might want to stay. And so let's get to number 6. Number 6 is a tourist or visitor's visa. This is a visa, and I would say people use it when they come to this country to visit and see the country, come on holiday. But I've heard au pairs, and I actually have a friend of a friend. My friend's friend did this. She was here during the pandemic, and then the pandemic just ended a little bit after her year. Not even a little bit after. The pandemic just ended, and then she was due to go home like 2 months later or something like that. But she didn't feel like she had traveled enough. And so what she did is she applied for a visitor's visa because it gave her like 6 more months to be here. And so she just got to travel. She got to do everything she wanted to do. She had like a list of places she wanted to go to. And so she did that. She applied for a visitor's visa. I would say definitely look into it if you feel like you still either not sure if you want to go home, or you still not sure if you've seen everything and you don't know maybe when you're gonna see it. Because when you leave the country, it's more harder to come back and visit than when you're here. Go visit the country, go see what you want to go do what you want to do, and then pack your bags and go home. There's that option. This is actually a pretty, like, especially the visitor's visa, it's a pretty simple process. Like, I was looking at it on the line. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3. It's pretty simple. You do have to pay money. It's like, what, $550. So once again, if you have money saved, it's gonna help you. But that is it. I just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything important to tell you guys. That is it for today's video. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you know any other way that au pairs have stayed in the country or have just decided to extend their year, please let me know. Legal ways. We're doing stuff legal over here. Let me know in the comment section, and I'm excited to see you guys in the next video. Bye.